My sister tried to steal my inheritance in court, but she didn't know I had uncovered the judge's secret. The truth came out, and everything changed. Stay with me as I share how I stood up and showed him what family really means. And if this story moves you, don't forget to support our channel. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and share it with your loved one. Nia Boateng couldn't believe the letter in her hands. Her older sister Efua had filed a legal claim to take over her inheritance, the property and shops their late father had left her. Nia's heart pounded. All those years of quiet responsibility, all the late nights helping with the family business, and now this? Efua wanted it all. The next morning, Nia found herself in the bustling Accra courthouse. She could feel the weight of every curious glance as she entered. And there was Efua, standing tall and confident, a smug smile playing on her lips. She didn't even hide the contempt in her eye. "This estate should have been mine all along," Efua said loudly, her voice echoing in the hall. "Father clearly wanted me to have it." Nia gripped her folder tightly, feeling the sweat forming on her palms. Her lawyer, Kojo Mensah, leaned in and whispered, "Stay calm. There's more to this than meets the eye." Nia took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. She knew Efua would stop at nothing to win, manipulating relatives, twisting the truth, even lying outright if she had to. But Nia wasn't defenseless. Hidden safely in her bag was a secret document, one that could completely change the course of the case. She just had to be smart, patient, and ready to strike at the right moment. As the courtroom doors closed and the proceedings began, Nia's mind raced. She could feel it in her bones. This battle would test everything: her courage, her wits, and her will to fight for what was rightfully hers. And she wasn't about to lose. Nia sat alone in her small apartment in Accra, her mind wandering back to that unforgettable day in Kumasi. She remembered standing in her father's study, the late afternoon sun streaming through the tall windows, dust motes floating in the golden light. Her father's desk, polished and imposing, had always been locked, and she had never dared to touch it. But that day, curiosity and a strange sense of urgency pushed her forward. With trembling hands, she found the key tucked away in a drawer her father had always kept hidden. Her heart raced as she slid open the drawer and found a neatly folded envelope marked in her father's handwriting. She unfolded it and froze. There it was, the true copy of her father's will. Every word, every clause was clear and precise. The family property, the shops, everything was hers. For a moment, Nia felt a rush of triumph. But then reality hit. If she acted immediately, Efua would suspect something. Efua was cunning and ruthless, always ready to twist the truth and play the victim to anyone who would listen. Nia had seen her sister in action countless times, charming relatives, spreading rumors, planting seeds of doubt. It was better to wait, to plan carefully, and strike at the perfect moment. Nia's memories shifted to the months that followed. She had watched quietly as Efua whispered lies to relatives, painting Nia as selfish, inexperienced, and unworthy. Family gatherings turned cold, and whispers followed her wherever she went. Each lie Efua spread felt like a small cut, but Nia stayed silent. She refused to let anger cloud her judgment. That night, alone in her room, Nia made a silent vow. "If she thinks she can cheat me," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest, "she hasn't met me yet." It wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about justice, about proving that integrity and patience could overcome deceit. She spent days and nights planning her next moves carefully. How would she present the will? How could she anticipate Efua's tricks in court? Every possibility, every potential obstacle, she mapped in her mind. Nia knew that the upcoming courtroom battle would be more than just a fight over property. It would be a battle for truth, for respect, and for the legacy of her father's wishes. As she looked at the envelope again, tucked safely away in her drawer, Nia felt a quiet surge of confidence. The stage was set, and the drama was about to escalate. Efua had started a war she didn't understand, and Nia was ready. She would not only defend what was hers, but also reveal the truth, no matter how long it took. The courtroom was packed that morning, the air thick with tension and murmurs. Nia Boateng sat on the edge of her seat, her hands clutching the folder that contained her father's true will. She could feel every eye in the room, weighing her, judging her, waiting for the drama to unfold. Across the room, her sister Efua sat tall and composed, her smug smile a stark contrast to the tight knot in Nia's stomach. When the hearing began, Nia's lawyer, Kojo Mensah, stood and presented the will. He spoke clearly, laying out the facts with calm authority. Nia watched the judge, Justice Kwame Addo, as he scanned the pages. But something didn't feel right. The judge nodded politely, but there was a certain softness, a hesitation in his eyes whenever he looked at Efua. And then it happened. Efua's side called forward witnesses, supposedly reputable family friends, who claimed Nia had forged the will. Their words were rehearsed, slick, and carefully crafted to cast doubt. The courtroom gasped at some of their claims, and whispers began to ripple through the seats. Nia's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. She could feel her pulse in her temples, a steady drumbeat reminding her that she had to stay sharp. As the witnesses spoke, Nia studied Judge Atto carefully. He seemed unusually sympathetic to Efua, nodding at her points, his expression softening in ways that made Nia uneasy. Something about his gestures, the quick flicker of a nervous glance whenever Efua spoke, didn't sit right with her. It was subtle, almost invisible to everyone else, but Nia had learned to read people well. Her mind raced. Why would a judge show any sign of favoring Efua? What was hidden beneath his calm, impartial facade? Nia's instincts screamed that there was more to this case than anyone could see, a secret pulling strings behind the scene. She took a deep breath, focusing on the folder in front of her, the quiet reassurance of knowing she held the truth. As the courtroom buzzed with murmurs, Nia leaned slightly toward Kojo and whispered, "Something's off. Watch him closely. He's hiding something." Kojo nodded, his eyes sharp and alert, mirroring Nia's concern. The tension in the room felt almost tangible, a living thing, twisting around them as the hearing continued. Every word, every gesture mattered now. Nia knew this was only the beginning of a battle that would demand all her courage, patience, and cleverness. She wouldn't just fight for her inheritance. She would fight to expose the truth, no matter where it was hidden. And deep down, she knew one thing for certain. Efua had started a war she couldn't fully control. The courtroom had been in chaos for hours when the judge finally called for a recess. Nia stepped out into the bright courtyard, her palms sweaty and her mind spinning with tension. She leaned against a stone bench, trying to steady her racing thoughts. That's when Amma, her oldest friend and confidant, appeared, weaving through the small crowd of onlookers. "Amma," Nia whispered, relief flooding her voice. "I don't know how much longer I can handle this." "Efua, she's playing everyone, even the judge." Amma shook her head, her expression serious. "Nia, listen carefully. I overheard something I think you need to know." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Judge Atto's secretary. She said the judge secretly owns a company that would benefit if your father's property goes to Efua. Every shop, every corner of that estate, it feeds into his pockets if she wins." Nia's eyes went wide. She could feel the air go out of her lungs for a moment. Her mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't even realized were there. The subtle glances, the small smirks, the way the judge had seemed unusually favorable toward Efua. It all suddenly made sense. There was a hidden layer to this courtroom drama, one that went far beyond lies and forged witnesses. This was corruption. She clenched her folder, gripping the edge like it was a lifeline. This revelation changed everything. She had to be careful. One wrong move, one poorly timed accusation, and she could lose everything. But if she played it right, legally and smartly, she could not only defend her inheritance, but also expose the judge's secret connections. Amma continued, her voice steady. "I'm telling you now because you need to plan your next steps. You can't confront him directly yet. You need proof, solid evidence, something the court can't ignore. If you do this right, Nia, you win and the truth comes out." Nia nodded, determination settling in her chest. She had faced Efua's lies before, but this was bigger. The fight wasn't just about property anymore. It was about justice, integrity, and exposing someone who had misused their power. As they returned to the courtroom, Nia's steps were lighter, but her mind worked furiously. She observed the judge now with a new perspective, noting every twitch, every hesitant glance, every tiny indication that connected him to Efua. This was the hidden truth, the secret she had to reveal. And when the time came, she would do it carefully, dramatically, and with undeniable proof. For the first time that day, a small smile tugged at Nia's lip. Efua had no idea what was coming. Nia wasn't just fighting for her inheritance. She was about to turn the entire courtroom upside down. The courtroom buzzed with tension as everyone settled back into their seats after the recess. Nia's heart pounded, but this time, she felt a quiet steel inside her. Across the room, Efua's eyes gleamed with mischief. She leaned back in her chair and let out a small, mocking laugh. "You really think you can handle this, little sister?" Efua sneered, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear. "You're so inexperienced. Maybe your father made a mistake leaving this to you." Nia's jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. She simply gripped the folder in front of her, the one containing the evidence that could change everything. She could feel the weight of every eye in the courtroom, some sympathetic, some skeptical, all waiting for the drama to unfold. Judge Atto spoke, his tone calm and measured, seemingly impartial. But Nia had learned to read between the lines. She noticed subtle slips, the quick glance he cast toward her notes, the faint smirk that played across his face whenever Efua spoke. Small signs, almost invisible to anyone else, but enough to tell Nia that the judge's neutrality was fragile. She leaned toward Kojo, lowering her voice to a whisper. "It's time. Present the proof." Kojo's eyes met hers, sharp and steady. He nodded once, understanding the gravity of the moment. He rose, straightening his suit, and began to speak, his voice confident but calm. Nia felt her pulse quicken, a mixture of fear and excitement swirling inside her. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the turning point where patience, strategy, and truth would collide. As Kojo spoke, Nia watched Efua's smug expression falter ever so slightly. The courtroom held its collective breath, the whispers fading into tense silence. Every person in the room could feel that something monumental was about to happen. Nia's fingers tightened around the folder, feeling the reassuring weight of the evidence inside. She didn't just want to win, she wanted justice, and she wanted the truth to be undeniable. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about exposing deceit, protecting her father's legacy, and showing that greed and lies could not triumph over integrity. For the first time that morning, Nia allowed herself to feel the fire of determination. Efua had mocked her, tried to undermine her, and counted on her silence. But now Nia was ready. The drama was about to escalate, and the courtroom would never forget the moment when truth began to fight back. Nia's hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She stood slowly, every eye in the courtroom turning toward her. She walked toward the judge's bench, her steps steady, her head held high. In her hands was the folder, the one that held the secret that could change everything. "Your Honor," Nia said, her voice calm but firm, "I have something important to present." She placed the folder gently on the bench in front of Judge Addo, making sure everyone could see it. Kojo gave her a subtle nod, and Nia opened the folder to reveal the documents inside. There were emails, financial statements, and contracts, proof that the judge had a direct connection to Efua's business. Every document pointed to the same thing, a hidden conflict of interest, a reason why the judge had been unusually sympathetic toward Efua all along. The courtroom fell deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Judge Addo's eyes widened as he scanned the papers, and for the first time that day, his composure cracked. His face went pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he reached for the documents. He opened his mouth, clearly trying to find words, but none came. Efua, who had been smirking and whispering to her supporters just moments before, froze. Her confidence evaporated like smoke. Her eyes darted back and forth, searching for a way out, but the truth stared her in the face. The evidence was undeniable, and her smug smile faltered, slowly disappearing entirely. Whispers began to ripple through the courtroom. Relatives, friends, and onlookers leaned forward, exchanging shocked glances. Some covered their mouths, unable to believe what they were seeing. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The power dynamic had shifted in an instant, and everyone could feel it. Nia's chest swelled with quiet satisfaction. She didn't gloat, didn't raise her voice. She simply stood there, calm and composed, letting the evidence speak for itself. All the planning, all the patience, all the careful steps she had taken led to this moment. Kojo stepped forward, addressing the judge respectfully but firmly. "Your Honor, this evidence clearly shows a conflict of interest. The integrity of this trial has been compromised. We ask that you recuse yourself immediately, and that this case be reassigned to ensure fairness." The judge stammered, trying to defend himself, but every word only made his discomfort more obvious. Nia met his eyes for a brief moment, not with anger, but with unwavering determination. She knew that justice was finally on her side, and that the truth could not be silenced. The courtroom buzzed with tension, disbelief, and awe. Nia's careful strategy had worked. She had revealed the hidden truth, and nothing would ever be the same again. The courtroom was still buzzing with whispers when Kojo Mensah, Nia's lawyer, stepped forward. He straightened his jacket, cleared his throat, and addressed the judge in a steady, firm voice. "Your Honor," he began, "the integrity of this trial has been seriously compromised. The evidence we have presented shows a clear conflict of interest that affects the fairness of these proceedings. We respectfully request the immediate reassignment of this case and the annulment of any biased decisions that have been made." The words hung in the air like a lightning strike. For a moment, everything was silent, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest and makes the room feel impossibly heavy. Judge Addo shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He opened his mouth to speak, to protest, to argue, but the weight of the evidence left him frozen. Every document, every email, every link to Efua's business made his protests meaningless. Efua, sitting a few rows away, fidgeted nervously, her earlier confidence now replaced by panic. She muttered under her breath, but no one paid attention. Everyone's eyes were on the judge and the documents that had upended her carefully constructed plan. Nia stayed perfectly still. Her hands rested lightly on the table, her face calm and composed, her eyes steady. She didn't need to raise her voice or gesture dramatically. The truth was doing the work for her. She felt a quiet surge of pride, not just for defending her inheritance, but for standing up to deceit and corruption with dignity and patience. The courtroom began to murmur again, but this time it was different. There was a shift in energy, a collective acknowledgement that Nia had won a moral victory, even before any official decision was announced. People leaned forward, whispering admiration to one another, impressed by her courage and composure under pressure. The judge finally cleared his throat, his voice shaky, as he nodded in acknowledgement of the undeniable facts. The tension that had gripped the room for hours seemed to ease slightly, replaced by a sense of justice finally starting to take hold. Kojo returned to Nia's side, giving her a reassuring nod. Nia met his eyes and gave the tiniest smile. They both knew that this was the turning point, the moment where the tide shifted irreversibly in their favor. Efua's lies, her manipulation, and her attempts to bend the rules could no longer stand. The courtroom, the witnesses, even the relatives who had doubted Nia, all of them were now witnesses to the undeniable power of truth. Nia felt a wave of calm determination wash over her. The battle wasn't over, but the path forward was clear. Justice had begun to assert itself, and nothing could stop her from finally claiming what was rightfully. Efua's face had turned red, her eyes flashing with anger. For the first time that day, her carefully crafted composure shattered completely. She jumped to her feet, slamming her hands on the table. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her voice echoing through the courtroom. This is all your fault, Nia. You've ruined everything. You've destroyed my plans, and I will not stand for it." The judge raised a hand, trying to calm her, but Efua ignored him. She spun around, pointing at Nia, her voice rising with each word. "I was supposed to inherit everything, and now, because of you, it's all falling apart." Nia sat perfectly still, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't interrupt, didn't argue, and didn't flinch. She let Efua rage, knowing that every word, every outburst, was exposing her own greed and deceit. With each accusation, Efua was showing everyone exactly what kind of person she truly was. The courtroom was alive with whispers. Relatives leaned toward each other, exchanging shocked looks. "Did you hear that?" someone murmured. "She's been lying to us all this time," another whispered. "All those stories about Nia being unworthy, it's all her own plan." Efua's rant continued, but it was no longer frightening. It was pathetic. She stomped around, waving papers, her voice growing louder with desperation. The more she spoke, the more everyone realized how manipulative and selfish she had been. Nia's silence contrasted sharply with Efua's chaos, making the truth even clearer. Finally, unable to contain herself any longer, Efua stormed out of the courtroom, slamming the doors behind her. The sound echoed like a final punctuation mark on her failed scheme. The room settled into a stunned quiet. People looked at Nia with new respect, admiration, and a little awe. Witnesses who had been intimidated by Efua's earlier confidence now seemed to see her for who she really was. The lies, the manipulation, the greed, it was all out in the open now, on full display, without Nia having to say a single word. Nia took a slow, deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This was more than a victory in court. It was a revelation. People were finally seeing the truth about Efua, and Nia knew that, after this, no one would ever doubt her honesty, her patience, or her strength. She allowed herself the tiniest, satisfied smile, quietly confident that the tide had turned completely in her favor. After the chaos of Efua's outburst, the court moved quickly to restore order. A new judge was assigned, someone known for fairness and impartiality. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense but hopeful. Everyone seemed to hold their breath as the evidence and the original will were carefully reviewed once more. Kojo stood beside Nia, confident and composed, while Nia herself felt a mixture of nerves and relief. She had fought so long, planned so carefully, and now the moment of truth had finally arrived. The court examined the documents, the emails, and the contracts that proved the judge's earlier conflict of interest. They looked at the original will, the one her father had clearly written in her favor. Every detail pointed to the same conclusion. The estate and the shops rightfully belonged to Nia. Finally, the new judge leaned forward and spoke. After reviewing all evidence presented, it is clear that Nia Boteng is the rightful heir to her father's estate. The inheritance is granted fully and legally to her. The courtroom erupted, some with quiet gasps, some with applause, and some with whispered congratulations. Nia felt her heart swell with a mixture of relief, pride, and vindication. She had not only won the case, but she had also exposed the corruption and deceit that had threatened her family's legacy. Efua, sitting nearby, looked as though she had been struck, her face twisted with fury, her hands shaking, but there was nothing she could do. The law was clear, the evidence undeniable, and her schemes had failed completely. She was powerless, and everyone could see it. Despite everything, Nia made a choice. She turned to Efua and said calmly, I'm giving you a small allowance, enough to live comfortably, but you will never control or manipulate our family assets again." There was no anger in her voice, only firmness and fairness. Nia knew that revenge would solve nothing. Justice, integrity, and boundaries would. The relatives and witnesses who had doubted her now looked on with respect and admiration. Nia's calm determination, patience, and careful strategy had paid off. She had protected her father's legacy, preserved the family estate, and shown everyone that greed and deceit could not win when truth and courage stood firm. As Nia left the courtroom that day, she felt a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. This victory was more than property or money. It was the proof that honesty, strategy, and courage could overcome even the most ruthless opposition. The estate was hers, but more importantly, she had reclaimed her family's trust and her own dignity. Nia stepped through the door of her family home, feeling a wave of relief and happiness wash over her. Her mother, Akojua, rushed forward, tears streaming down her face, and hugged her tightly. "Oh, Nia," she whispered, "I'm so proud of you." Her younger brother, Kwesi, grinned from ear to ear, bouncing with excitement. For the first time in months, the house felt alive with laughter, warmth, and love. Over the next few weeks, Nia threw herself into restoring the family shops. She painted walls, fixed broken signs, and organized everything with care. But she didn't stop there. She made it a point to employ local youth from the neighborhood, giving them a chance to learn skills, earn money, and take pride in their work. The shops became more than a business. They became a symbol of community, hope, and new beginning. At home, Nia focused on strengthening her family bond. She spent evenings talking with her mother and brother, sharing stories, and rebuilding trust that had been strained by Efua's lies. She also learned an important lesson about boundaries. Love and forgiveness didn't mean allowing manipulation or greed to take root again. She and Akojua worked together to set clear rules for the family estate, ensuring that their hard-earned legacy would be protected for years to come. Sitting quietly one evening, looking out over the busy streets and the lively shops, Nia reflected on everything that had happened. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. Greed can blind hearts, she thought, but truth has a way of shining. My inheritance wasn't just property. It was a lesson in courage, patience, and standing up for what is right. For Nia, this victory was more than legal. It was personal, emotional, and transformative. She had fought for what was hers, restored her family's honor, and built a future where integrity and love would always come first.